There are moments in life when someone is sitting right next to you, smiling, talking, laughing, but inside your bones, you feel absolutely nothing. No warmth, no pull, no resonance. It's as if their soul is speaking a language yours will never understand. And if you're a Scorpio, you know exactly what I mean. Because you don't connect with people by how long you've known them. You connect by how deeply you can feel them. And no matter how kind someone appears on the outside, if their soul doesn't carry a certain truth, a certain weight, a certain willingness to bleed where it hurts, then you, the Scorpio, will feel it in your gut. That silent rejection, that spiritual mismatch, that inner voice whispering, this one is not for you. It's not arrogance, it's not judgment, it's energy. It's the sacred compass in your chest that doesn't lie even when you wish it would. People think Scorpio is hard to please, but the truth is far deeper than preference. You're not just looking for chemistry. You're looking for recognition not of the face, but of the frequency. You're drawn to souls who've sat with their shadows, who've buried something lost, something survived something. People who don't flinch at silence. People who aren't afraid of pain. People who carry their truth even when no one applauds it. Because you do. You always have. And when someone only knows how to smile on the surface, when they live in avoidance, in performance, in pretense, it feels like standing in front of a mirror that refuses to reflect anything real. So you withdraw, not out of spite, but out of spiritual preservation. You disappear from people who were never really present in the first place. And maybe they'll say you're cold or intense or too much. But the truth is they were never deep enough to hold space for your spirit. Because not everyone is meant to walk beside Scorpio. Not because Scorpio thinks they're better, but because Scorpio walks with the unseen. You were born into the realm of transformation, where the ego dies and the soul gets stripped bare, where loyalty is sacred and silence is louder than words, where energy doesn't lie and neither do you. So today, we're going to speak out loud what you've felt in silence for years. We're going to name the 10 types of people who Scorpio will always feel spiritually disconnected from, no matter how kind they are, how long they've been in your life, or how many memories you've shared. And maybe you've tried to force the bond. Maybe you've tried to stay loyal, to keep giving, to see the best in them. But deep down, your spirit already knew. These people weren't meant to stay in your frequency. So let's begin, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with clarity. So you can understand why you felt what you felt, and never apologize for protecting your sacred space again. Because the truth is, Scorpio, your soul remembers what your heart tried to ignore, and now it's time to honor that. People number 1, the performer of surface joy. They light up every room they enter, always smiling, always laughing, always fine. They post sunsets and coffee cups with captions like, grateful for the little things. They fill the air with feel-good quotes, motivational talks, and endless positivity. They are the performers of surface joy, and to most people, they're inspiring. But not to you, because you, Scorpio, you see the cracks behind the glass, you feel the tension underneath the cheerfulness. You hear the silence in their eyes when everyone else only hears their voice. And it's exhausting, not because they're happy, but because they're hiding behind their happiness. You know this pattern too well. The overcompensation, the forceful optimism, the refusal to admit that life sometimes hurts deeply. And when someone lives in denial of their own darkness, how can they ever meet you in yours? You, Scorpio, are made of shadows. You don't run from them, you study them, you transform in them. You've learned that joy without depth is just noise, that peace without pain is a performance, and that sometimes the most healing moment isn't someone saying, "You'll be okay," but someone sitting beside you and whispering, "I've been broken too." But these performers, they don't sit, they keep moving, keep posting, keep pretending. They talk about letting go not because they have, but because they're afraid of what will surface if they actually stay still. And for you, that's unbearable. You've walked through grief, You've faced betrayal, you've burned in your own self-destruction and built something sacred from the ashes. You don't need people to be perfect, you need them to be present. Present in the truth, present in the moment, present with themselves no matter how uncomfortable that truth is. But the performer is never really there. They're somewhere above the pain, floating in toxic positivity and rehearsed laughter. And when you try to connect, it's like reaching for a hologram. Because Scorpio doesn't connect through words, you connect through resonance, through shared silence, through mutual depth, through scars, not smiles. And so, despite their good intentions, despite how nice they seem, you feel nothing but hollowness in their presence. Your energy recoils, your body withdraws, your soul whispers, there is no bridge here. And maybe you've tried. Maybe you stayed longer than you should have, hoping they'd remove the mask. Maybe you asked the hard questions, hoping for a crack of truth. Maybe you even dimmed your depth to match their surface. But Scorpio, you can't live in shallow waters. You weren't made to tread lightly. You were made to dive deep. And when someone insists on only dancing in the light, refusing to even acknowledge their shadows, you feel spiritually exiled, as if you're speaking from the bottom of the ocean to someone who's sunbathing on the shore. There's no hatred here, no resentment, just a simple, profound realization you don't belong in the same emotional universe. And that's okay. You don't need to change them. You don't need to fix them. You just need to honor what your energy already knows. Connection without truth is just contact. And Scorpio doesn't mistake one for the other. Life lesson. True connection requires more than positivity. It demands vulnerability. It calls for people willing to sit with what's raw, real, and uncomfortable. If someone can only meet you when things are light, then they will disappear the moment your soul asks for depth. So honor the distance. It's not rejection, it's spiritual discernment. People know too. The energy leech, they don't knock, they don't ask, they just show up, dragging their chaos behind them like a shadow that never learned to stand still. At first, they come to you with stories that touch your heart, tragedies, breakups, struggles. They tell you everything often too soon. And because you Scorpio are wired for depth, you listen, you hold space, you feel with them. You offer your energy not out of obligation, but because your soul is built to transform pain. But as time passes, something shifts. You begin to notice a pattern. They never change. They never do the inner work. They never rise from their suffering. They just retell it over and over again. And worse, they expect you to carry it with them. No. Not with them, for them. These are the energy leeches, masters of draining rooms with their invisible thirst, people who live in a constant state of emotional debt but never make payments. And you, Scorpio, become their supplier. They come to you because your energy is rich, fertile, magnetic, because you understand pain better than anyone, but they don't come to learn from your wisdom. They come to absorb your strength. And over time, your body tells you what your heart has tried to ignore. You feel tired after every conversation, not the good tired, not the we just had a real connection tired, but the empty tired. The kind of tired that feels like something was taken, but nothing was given in return. Because with energy leeches, that's exactly what happens. They don't share their story to connect, they share it to feed. And you, Scorpio, being the healer that you are, stay far longer than you should. You tell yourself they're hurting, they just need time, they'll grow. But months pass, years even, and their pain becomes a loop, a tool, a mask, a strategy for never changing. And suddenly your inner world becomes polluted. You start doubting your own intuition. You start questioning your boundaries. You feel guilty for needing space, as if your worth is measured by how much pain you can tolerate. But here's the truth. Scorpio healing isn't the same as enabling. And your compassion is not an infinite well for people who refuse to dig their own. You've earned your strength. You've bled for your clarity. You've walked through fire that nearly destroyed you, and came back with wisdom most people will never understand. And for someone to simply siphon your energy without ever honoring your journey, that's not a connection. That's a transaction. A one-sided deal written in invisible ink where you keep giving and they keep taking. And so you begin to feel it. The spiritual disconnection, the internal pullback, the unspoken boundary your soul starts to build even when your words haven't caught up yet. It starts with less eye contact, shorter replies, a heaviness in your chest when their name appears on your screen, and eventually, silence. Not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started caring for yourself. Energy leeches are not evil. They're wounded. But their refusal to rise their addiction to being seen as victims without ever seeking truth makes it impossible for Scorpio to stay connected on a soul level. Because you were not meant to carry people. You were meant to guide them through their own darkness, but only when they're ready to walk. And when they refuse, you leave. Not in anger, not in rage, but in sacred preservation, because no one knows better than a Scorpio. Not all pain is meant to be healed by you. Some is meant to teach you when to let go. Life lesson. Not everyone who suffers wants to grow, and not everyone who seeks your energy deserves your presence. You are not a sponge. You are not a therapist. You are not a bottomless reservoir for other people's unprocessed grief. You are a mirror of transformation, but even a mirror must protect itself from those who only come to stare, never to see. People number 3, the emotionally numb. They're calm, collected, unbothered by the storm, or so it seems. They rarely cry, they don't get angry, they never say too much. They live in the safe zone where emotions are managed, minimized, or completely ignored. To others, they seem grounded, mature, even admirable. But to you, Scorpio, they feel like a room with no windows, a song without a soul, a desert where no truth has ever grown. Because you don't connect through routine or logic or politeness, you connect through feeling, through the pulse of emotion, through rawness, realness, intensity. And when someone is emotionally numb, when they avoid conflict, suppress sadness, or disengage from intimacy, you feel like you're speaking to a wall made of ice. Scorpio, you weren't made to skim the surface. You were born in the depths, in the realm where pain teaches love burns and silence screams. So when someone flinches at depth, when they change the subject at the first sign of vulnerability, when they smile instead of break down, when they ghost instead of confront, you don't just feel disconnected. You feel invisible, because if they can't meet you in emotion, they can't meet you at all. And what hurts even more is this: you try. You lower your intensity, you soften your fire, you give them space, time, patience. But all you receive is emptiness in return. They may care for you, they may even love you in their own way, but their soul is locked in a cage of emotional fear, and no matter how deeply you feel, you cannot feel for them. And so the disconnection begins. It's not dramatic. There's no explosion, just a slow, aching realization that you are alone in the connection, because the emotionally numb don't abandon you with anger. They abandon you with absence. They sit beside you without reaching for you. They listen without hearing you. They exist, but they do not engage. And for a Scorpio, that is spiritual starvation. You need people who can feel not just when it's beautiful, but when it's terrifying. You need people who won't run when your pain surfaces. People who won't hide behind, "I'm fine." People who understand that true intimacy doesn't mean sharing space, it means sharing truth. And when you try to love someone who is emotionally unavailable, you begin to betray yourself. Because your soul starts to shrink. You stop speaking as openly. You start pretending that maybe shallow is enough. You convince yourself that being close is better than being known. But deep down, you feel it, the void, the silent ache, the spiritual disconnection that no amount of time or love can fill. And one day, without warning, you leave. Not with malice, but with mourning. Because Scorpio doesn't leave when they're angry, they leave when they're empty. And that's what the emotionally numb do to you. Not because they're cruel, but because they've built walls around their hearts so high no light gets in and no soul gets out. Life lesson. Emotional safety doesn't come from avoiding emotion. It comes from being willing to feel even when it hurts. If you numb your pain, you also numb your joy. And if you can't access your own feelings, you'll never access the soul of another. Scorpio is not for the faint of heart. And you should never apologize for needing what most people are too afraid to offer: emotional honesty, spiritual presence, and the courage to feel fully. People look for 4. The fake spiritualist. They speak in soft tones, burn sage, light candles, wear crystals around their neck, and quote Rumi on their Instagram stories. They talk about the universe, about alignment, about high vibrations. They say things like everything happens for a reason, even when the reason is clearly avoidance. They know all the right words, but none of the right wounds. To the world, they look like healers. To most, they sound awakened. But to you, Scorpio, they feel hollow. Because underneath the feathers and incense, you sense something else, ego dressed in enlightenment. You can smell the performance, the need to be seen as spiritual without ever having done the soul work. They talk about letting go, but never admit what they're still attached to. They preach forgiveness, but haven't faced their own rage. They claim they've transcended, but you know they've simply escaped. And Scorpio, you don't run from shadow. You walk into it with open eyes and shaking hands. You've died and resurrected in ways they'll never understand. So when someone speaks of light but avoids their own darkness, you don't feel inspired. You feel alone, because their spirituality is performance art, a curated image, a defense mechanism, a way to feel superior without ever being vulnerable. They want the wisdom without the suffering, the power without the breakdown, the crown without the crucifixion. But Scorpio knows there is no light without shadow, no truth without destruction, no awakening without agony. You've earned your depth, not by reading books or quoting mystics, but by sitting in your own grief, questioning everything, facing your demons when no one was watching. And that's why their energy repels you, not because they're spiritual, but because they're using spirituality to hide from pain, from growth, from self. And you feel it. You feel how their words float above the room, never landing in the gut. You sense the contradiction in their aura, a quiet fear of being truly seen. Because if someone has never been broken, how can they help anyone else heal? You've tried to connect. You've asked deeper questions. You've opened space for authenticity. But all you receive in return is a layer of varnish over an untouched soul. And eventually you withdraw. Not because you don't believe in spiritual growth, but because you know real growth is raw, ugly, and sacred. You don't need someone who pretends to be whole. You need someone who remembers being shattered and still chose to love anyway. And so the disconnection grows, not with anger, but with clarity. Because Scorpio doesn't care about appearances, you care about energy. And the energy of a fake spiritualist is off-key no matter how pretty the words. Life lesson. True spirituality isn't about looking perfect. It's about owning your imperfection. It's about facing your darkness, not bypassing it with affirmations and crystals. You can't heal others from a place you've never bled, and you can't connect with Scorpio by pretending you've never fallen apart. Scorpio isn't looking for people who float above life. You're looking for those who've walked through hell and still carry grace in their eyes. People of 5. The control freak. They know the right way to do everything. They plan, they manage, they organize, they fix what's broken even when it wasn't theirs to fix. They believe every problem has a solution, and every solution must be theirs. To the world, they seem responsible, grounded, reliable. But to you, Scorpio, they feel like a prison you never agreed to enter. Because what the world calls helpful, you often experience as energetic intrusion. These are the control freaks people who don't just want to support you, they want to define you. They give advice you never asked for. They insert themselves into your decisions. They can't handle mystery, ambiguity, or emotional independence. And Scorpio, you are nothing if not mysterious. You walk with silence like it's a trusted companion. You evolve in secret. You feel deeply but don't explain. You transform in the dark, not for attention, but for truth. And control freaks can't stand that because they need certainty. They crave predictability. They're terrified of what they can't understand and even more afraid of what they can't influence. And so they try to mold you, to categorize you, to pin you down and figure you out. But Scorpio, you are not a puzzle to be solved. You are a soul in motion, a creature of instinct transformation and sacred privacy. And when someone tries to manage your path, your energy does what it always does in the face of control. It withdraws. It recoils, it retreats, it closes every door, not in anger, but in self-preservation. Because with control freaks, the cost of connection is too high. You can't breathe, you can't feel, you can't unfold on your own terms. And that's what Scorpio needs most, the freedom to become. Control freaks don't see your silence as strength, they see it as a problem. They push you to open up, but not to understand you, only to manage you. And the more they try, the more distant you become. Because connection for Scorpio is not about interference. It's about respecting the invisible. It's about sensing when to come close and when to let the other soul roam. But control freaks have no reverence for boundaries. Not because they're malicious, but because they believe love must be active, intervening, hands-on. Yet you know, real love knows when to step back. Real love knows when to trust. And if someone doesn't trust your path, how can your spirit trust them? So over time, the spiritual disconnection sets in, not with a fight, not with fireworks, but with silence. The kind that grows between two people when one no longer feels safe to unfold. Because for Scorpio, safety isn't found in logic or structure. It's found in the sacred space to evolve without interference. Life lesson: control is the opposite of connection. When you try to manage someone else's journey, you rob them of their right to awaken on their own terms. Scorpio thrives in the wild, not under watchful eyes, but in hidden corners where transformation happens in stillness. To love a Scorpio is to trust the unfolding even when it looks messy, even when you don't understand it, even when they don't explain. Let them be. And they might just let you in. People, but the gossip seeker. They always know who's dating who got fired, who's secretly unhappy in their marriage. They tell stories like currency trading in whispers, eye rolls, and screenshots. At first, they seem charming, entertaining, even insightful. They make you feel like you're on the inside, like you have access to some secret layer of the world that others can't see. But then something shifts. You notice how quickly they switch loyalty, how effortlessly they speak of others' pain as punchlines, how they never sit in silence, only in speculation. And worst of all, how easily they talk about someone who's not in the room. And that's when it hits you, Scorpio, you'll be next. Because if they're willing to dissect someone else's soul behind closed doors, what makes you think your darkness is safe with them? You, Scorpio, are sacred with your energy. You don't spill secrets. You don't offer your story to just anyone. You believe in privacy, in silence, in loyalty that holds even when no one's watching. And gossip is betrayal in disguise. To you, gossip isn't small talk, it's spiritual contamination. It clouds the energy of a room. It taints the unseen. It desecrates the trust that allows true connection to bloom. Because, if someone feeds off the wounds of others, they're not here to help you heal. They're here to gather data, to manipulate, to compare, to weaponize. And that's a danger you feel in your gut before the words even land. So you begin to pull away. You answer slower. You change the subject. You withhold what once flowed naturally. Not because you're hiding, but because you're protecting. Protecting your depth, your truth, your vulnerability. Because with gossip seekers, vulnerability becomes gossip the moment you walk away. And that's a risk you'll never take. They may think you're cold. They may accuse you of being distant, dramatic, too intense. But what they'll never understand is that for Scorpio, trust is a spiritual agreement. Once broken, even in whispers, it cannot be restored by smiles. Gossip is not entertainment to you. It's a signal, a red flag, a spiritual disconnect so deep it overrides charm history, even chemistry. You don't need people who know everyone's business. You need people who know how to guard what's sacred. People who don't chase stories, they hold space. People who don't narrate pain, they sit beside it. Because Scorpio, you carry too many truths inside you to ever hand them to someone who doesn't understand the weight of silence. Life lesson: words are energy, and how someone speaks of others is how they'll eventually speak of you. Spiritual connection requires more than shared laughter or secrets. It requires respect for people, for privacy, for the invisible threads that bind one soul to another. Let the gossip seekers gossip, but let your soul remain loyal to those who can keep a secret not just for you, but about you. People number 7, the energetically shallow. They move fast, talk fast, think fast. They're always on, always chasing something, a goal, a high, a person, an achievement. They thrive in crowds. They post selfies with filters and perfect angles. Their conversations orbit around trends. Money, who wore what, who dated whom, who climbed where. And when you try to go deeper to talk about loss, grief, purpose, or transformation, you see it in their eyes. Discomfort. They nod politely. They smile. They might even say, "Wow, that's deep." But they don't feel it. They don't stay with it. They don't know what to do with what you just offered. Because they're energetically shallow, rooted in the external, obsessed with appearance, allergic to silence. And to Scorpio, that kind of connection feels like starvation. You crave substance. You crave energy that lingers, that echoes beyond the words. You crave stillness that says more than noise. But the energetically shallow don't operate there. They need the stimulation of the moment. They talk to be heard, not to be understood. They want to feel good, not real. And Scorpio, you are the opposite. You don't chase good feelings, you chase truth. Even when it hurts, even when it tears you apart. Because you know only through destruction does the soul reveal its true face. The energetically shallow don't just bore you, they confuse you, because on the surface they may be successful, liked, popular, but spiritually, they're paper thin. And when you try to build something with them, friendship, intimacy, even conversation, it's like trying to build a house on sand. No foundation, no roots, no gravity. And you feel it in your body. You feel yourself zoning out. You feel your soul yawning. You feel the ache to disappear, even if they haven't done anything wrong. Because this is the disconnection, Scorpio doesn't often speak about the one where nothing bad happened, but still, your spirit doesn't stay. Because your soul knows what theirs won't admit. They don't want to feel, they want to escape. And you, Scorpio, have never been one to run. You've always chosen to descend before you rise, to break before you bloom, to feel pain because pain makes you honest. And anyone who builds their life avoiding that honesty is spiritually foreign to you, no matter how pretty their smile or perfect their resume. So you step back, quietly, respectfully, but permanently. Not because you hate them, but because you can't meet someone who refuses to meet themselves. And that is what energetic shallowness is. A refusal to look within, a refusal to dive, a refusal to pause long enough to feel the soul stirring beneath the noise. Life lesson: depth is not a luxury, it's a necessity for connection that heals, transforms, and endures. Scorpio doesn't ask for perfection. Scorpio asks for presence, for real energy, for people who have scars and aren't ashamed to show them. If someone can't swim to meet you, don't drown trying to reach them. Stay in your depths. The ones who belong there will find their way. People like 8, the manipulative empath. They seem soft, gentle, empathetic. They feel everything, or so they say. They cry easily, speak of being highly sensitive, and often claim they just want peace. They offer comfort play. The healer wear the label of empath like a badge of purity. But to Scorpio, something always feels off. At first, you trust them. You open up. You let them in because they seem to understand things others don't. They listen, nod, validate. They echo your words like a mirror that finally reflects you. But then, they begin to twist. Suddenly, your feelings become their drama. Your vulnerability becomes their leverage. They begin to subtly guilt you. I'm just trying to help. I feel everything you feel. I guess I care more than you do. And slowly you realize this is not empathy. This is emotional control masked in compassion. These are the manipulative empaths, those who use emotional attunement not to connect, but to control, to make you feel responsible for how they feel, to make you question your needs, your instincts, your reactions, to position themselves as spiritually superior while secretly feeding off your chaos. And Scorpio, you are intense. You carry deep oceans of feeling. You open portals when you speak. You reveal layers most people spend lifetimes avoiding. So when someone pretends to understand that depth, but only uses it to gain power, you don't just feel betrayed, you feel spiritually violated. Because trust for Scorpio is sacred. And when someone pretends to feel with you just to redirect the focus to themselves, that's not love. That's manipulation in silk. You begin to notice their patterns, how they're only empathetic when it benefits them, how they shift from nurturer to victim when called out, how they weaponize their emotions to gain sympathy, silence you, or avoid accountability. And the worst part, they make you feel like the bad one for setting boundaries. They say things like, I guess I just care too much, or I never thought you'd treat someone like me this way. But Scorpio, you see through that. Eventually, always you see. You sense the subtle power play. You feel the energetic imbalance. And no matter how gentle their tone or teary their eyes, you know when love is being used as a leash. And that's when your soul detaches. The cords cut quietly. No yelling, no drama, just distance. Because Scorpio may be loyal, but only to truth. And when the truth reveals itself as emotional manipulation, you don't argue, you don't fight. You disappear, not out of cruelty, but because you refuse to play spiritual games. Empathy should never feel like entrapment. Compassion should never demand your compliance, and love should never come with energetic strings. Life lesson: real empathy holds space, it doesn't invade it. A true empath helps you return to yourself. They don't rewrite your narrative for their benefit. Scorpio is drawn to authenticity, not theatrics. You feel too much to be fooled for long. So when someone starts using your emotions as tools for manipulation, trust what your soul already knows. Their heart might be soft, but their energy is not safe. People number 9, the emotionally unavailable lover. They say the right things. They show up. At first, they charm. They flirt, they even speak of connection, fate, and feeling something special. But when it's time to go deeper, to stay when things get uncomfortable, to show up with consistency, to talk about the real stuff, they vanish. Emotionally, spiritually, sometimes physically. These are the emotionally unavailable lovers, people who know how to mimic intimacy, but panic at the first sign of real closeness. And for Scorpio, this is one of the most devastating disconnections of all. Because when Scorpio loves, you love with your entire soul. You don't dabble, you don't test the water. You dive headfirst, no life vest, no hesitation. You're all in, even if it breaks you. But the emotionally unavailable lover, they never really enter the water. They stand at the edge talking about how deep it looks, how tempting it is, how they've never felt this before. But when you reach out your hand to pull them in, they take a step back. Again and again. They blame timing, stress, the past, their need for space. They say things like, "I'm just not ready," or "You're too intense," or "I don't want to lose myself." But Scorpio, you never ask them to lose themselves. You ask them to be present, to feel, to risk being seen fully and completely just like you always do. And when they pull away, you begin to question everything. Was it real? Did I imagine the connection? Am I too much? But the truth is, you weren't too much. They were too afraid. Too afraid to face their own wounds. Too afraid to surrender control. Too afraid to open the door to a love that doesn't just stroke the ego, but awakens the soul. Because the love Scorpio offers is not convenient, it's not cute, it's not light. It is transformational. It will confront you. It will hold up a mirror. It will burn away the false self and demand the real you to emerge. And not everyone is ready for that. So they run, sometimes politely, sometimes cowardly, sometimes slowly like a fading signal. And you, Scorpio, stay far longer than you should, hoping, waiting, giving one more chance, thinking if you just love them hard enough, they'll open. But they don't, because no matter how deeply you love them, if someone hasn't chosen to love themselves, they can never receive the kind of love you offer. And eventually, something inside you dies. The part of you that believed love could save them, the part of you that held on, hoping they'd return the depth. And so you walk away, not out of pride, but out of pain. Because Scorpio doesn't leave when they stop caring, you leave when caring becomes self-betrayal. Life lesson. Not every lover is meant to go where your soul is headed. Some are only meant to show you what you must never settle for again. A real connection isn't just about chemistry, it's about courage. The courage to feel, to stay, to open, to choose you again and again, even when it's scary. Scorpio, your love is rare, but it is not meant to be wasted on someone who only loves from the surface. Let them go, and keep your heart open for the one who can swim in your ocean without fear. People number 10, the self-denier. They're kind, they're polite, they follow the rules, they do what's expected. They never raise their voice, never stir the pot, never rock the boat, and yet they're empty. Not because they lack intelligence, talent, or potential, but because they have spent their entire lives abandoning themselves. These are the self-deniers, people who've forgotten who they truly are because they've spent too long becoming who the world told them to be. They silence their passions, suppress their instincts, ignore their inner voice, all in the name of being good, accepted, or safe. And Scorpio, you feel it immediately, that absence, that haunting stillness of a soul that hasn't spoken in years. You try to connect, but every time you speak to them, it feels like speaking to someone standing behind glass, smiling, nodding, but not really there. Because they're not. They left themselves long ago. Maybe it was childhood. Maybe it was trauma. Maybe it was the constant pressure to fit in, to be responsible, to stay small. Whatever it was, they chose survival over truth. And now, they live in performance. They say what's appropriate. They smile when they want to scream. They keep the peace even when it's killing them. And Scorpio, you can't breathe around that because you are raw truth. You are emotional rebellion. You are the sign of death and rebirth, and that includes burning away every lie you've ever been told about who you should be. You don't care if someone is broken. You care if they're honest. You care if they're trying. But the self-denier isn't trying to find themselves. They're trying to disappear. And nothing is more painful for a Scorpio than watching a soul bury itself alive. You ask them, "What do you want?" And they say, "Whatever you want." You challenge them. "Why don't you speak up?" They say, "It's not worth the fight." You open a space for truth and they fill it with silence. And so your spirit pulls away, not out of disdain, but out of grief. Because you know what it's like to lose yourself, but you also know how sacred it is to finally come back. You fought for your identity. You've faced your shadows. You've screamed in the dark and clawed your way back to your soul. So to be around someone who chooses numbness over awakening feels like betrayal, not of you, but of the truth you've bled to honor. And that's the deepest disconnection of all. Because it's not between you and them, it's between them and themselves. And no matter how much love you offer, no matter how safe you make it, no matter how patient you are, you cannot reach someone who's still hiding from their own reflection. So you let go, not with judgment, but with reverence. Because, everyone has their own timing. Everyone must choose their return. And some may never choose it at all. Life lesson. You can love someone deeply and still walk away when they choose the comfort of self-denial over the risk of self-acceptance. Scorpio doesn't demand perfection. Scorpio demands presence, the willingness to show up as your full, messy, evolving self. Because connection is not about being ready. It's about being real. And when someone isn't even real with themselves, they will never be real with you. Conclusion. The soul knows when to walk away. You've heard it before. Why are you so distant? Why did you cut them off? Why can't you just let it go? But the people asking those questions have never lived inside a Scorpio's soul. They don't know what it's like to feel everything, to carry emotion like fire burning, purifying, relentless. They don't understand that for you, disconnection doesn't come from disagreement. It comes from energetic truth. Because Scorpio doesn't walk away when they're angry. You walk away when your soul no longer recognizes the frequency in front of you. When there's no more pulse, no more resonance, no more possibility of real connection, no matter how much history, love, or effort you've invested. And maybe that makes you the villain in someone else's story. Maybe they say you're heartless, cold, dramatic, extreme. But you know the truth. You stayed long after your spirit had already left. You gave chances no one saw. You offered depth to those who could only survive in the shallow. You tried, but connection, true spiritual connection, can't be forced. It must rise. It must meet you. It must carry the weight of truth, pain, and transformation. And if it can't, you don't belong there. Not because you're better, not because you're bitter, but because your soul is sacred and it's not meant to be spent in places that cannot hold it. So if you've ever felt disconnected from someone and didn't know why, if your energy pulled away long before your body did, if you ever sat beside someone and felt like you were still alone, trust that. It wasn't in your head, it was in your spirit. And your spirit knows what your mind tries to rationalize. This isn't my place. This isn't my person. This isn't my frequency. Scorpio, you weren't made to belong everywhere. You were made to belong deeply, rarely, truly. And those who can't meet you there are not your people. Let them go and hold space for the rare few whose souls don't just recognize yours, they've been waiting for it. Final reflection, the path to your sacred circle. You don't need many, you just need true. People who don't flinch at silence, people who don't fear your shadows, people who don't try to fix you, mute you, or manage you. You need those who feel without fear, who walk beside you in the dark, who listen not with ears but with spirit. And when you find them, you won't have to explain why you pulled away from the others. Because they'll already know. They've done the same. And now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt disconnected from someone even though everything looked fine on the surface? Which of these 10 people did your soul recognize immediately? Tell me in the comments, because your truth might be the mirror someone else needs right now. And if this resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to the Path to Buddha Wisdom, where we speak the words you've always felt but never had a place to say out loud. Because Scorpio, you were never meant to fit in. You were meant to awaken. And that journey, it begins by honoring who your soul cannot walk with. And before we begin, if this speaks to your soul, if you've ever felt things so deeply that silence became your first language, then this channel was created for you. Subscribe to the Path to Buddha Wisdom, where Scorpio truths are honored, your depth is not too much, and your spiritual journey is never walked alone.